Right, so the next component in stage 2, which is standing out, is really gearing towards the video interview, the automated video interview. Sometimes it's a higher view, sometimes it's on another platform. They're all generally the same kind of thing. They're warming up to that real in-person interview stage. So what we're going to talk about now is, and look, this might extend beyond competency questions, but really the kind of automated video interviews are kind of foundationally based on those simpler interview questions, on those basis kind of what would you do in a certain situation, where have you shown this certain behavior or characteristic. But look, by the time you finish this course, you would have looked at kind of the latest series, which includes on how to answer commercial awareness questions, how to answer M&A deal questions, how to answer technical questions, how to answer brain teaser questions. Hopefully you'll be prepared for some of the other kind of curveballs they may throw at you, but really, you should have your competencies prepared, just kind of before you've applied, and also ready for that automated stage. This is very simple to get on top of. It's one of those components that once you put in the work, it will continue to pay dividends. It's low maintenance. You might renovate your examples, especially if you apply next year, but really once you've done it once, and once you've done it well, once you have 2 examples for each of those kind of competencies I'm going to be listing, you should be good to go. And then the only concern then is ensuring that the competencies you do have are really kind of solid. And the examples you have are solid. So once you've done that, be rest assured it's going to pay a lot of dividends for many interviews to come. And it's look, I think this is one of those components in the interview that is going to come up. And even if you knew just 70% of the questions you were going to get asked, and you would have prepared word to word, kind of what kind of response you would have been given, obviously in a conversational manner, for the 70% of the questions you were asked, you're going to smash that interview. You're going to do very well. So you cannot afford to mess this component up. Right. So competency questions. What I would do is I would use the STAR technique. And again, I love frameworks. These kind of, personally, when I was doing this, and I'm just sharing this approach, I found these frameworks to be the best things, because what they did was they forced me to be structured in my thinking. They forced me to prepare in a way that was detailed enough for the actual interview. And so let's break down the STAR technique. You may have heard of it, you may not have heard of it. The STAR technique begins with a situation component of your response. The task, the action, the task, the challenge that you had to complete. I gave it away. The third component is the action. That is by far the most important part of the STAR technique. Some people spend ages on the situation. Some people spend ages on the task and challenge. Some people spend ages on the reflection. No. It's the action. The action is the most important point. I mean, this has got to be the part where you show. You show off. This is the part where you had an impact. And then finally the reflection. And some people add a little bit of, the result, not reflection. So the reflection, I gave it away again. You may want to add a little kind of reflection at the end of that, after that result. So for example, okay, so this was the result. How do I approach this differently? So that's just a simple framework. So situation, task, action, result. And that should kind of give you a nice, solid structure to follow for fleshing out each of your examples. Now, if you're going into consulting, or if you have an example you may want to kind of go into a bit more detail on and leave hooks on that the interviewer may then ask you, for example, you kind of summarize a section you really want to expand upon, but you need for the interviewer to kind of delve into that a bit further, you may want to use the parade technique. The parade technique, that's PARADE. It came from the caseinterview.com website, and it really kind of breaks it down in a more thorough way. Probably too detailed for most interviews, but it could be useful for some interviews. I'd kind of keep these responses between 60 and 120 seconds, maybe a little bit more for some interviews, but that kind of gives you leeway to go shorter and also to expand a little bit more if you need to. But the parade technique, just for interest, is where you, similar to the STAR technique, just a bit expanded, you set out the problem, the anticipated consequence if you didn't do anything about that problem, the role, the action, the decision-making rationale behind your action, and also the end result. So again, very similar, bit more detailed. Okay, I suggest starting with the STAR technique first, at least. Now, what you then want to do is you want to list out all your past experiences that you think are really worthy of an interview, mentioning in an interview, and you kind of, doesn't have to be detailed, could be a Word document, could be a list, very simple. Once you have that, and you probably eventually think of new things to add over time, Once you add that, you then want to really kind of choose 2 examples for each of the following competencies. And hopefully we'll be writing a blog post about this just to kind of expand it a bit more. But essentially that includes an example for teamwork. That pretty much always comes up. If there's only going to be one competency question, it's going to be a teamwork question. You also have adaptability, communication, conflict resolution, resilience, such as dealing with adversity. So, okay, tell me a time you showed persistence. Tell me a time you were rejected. Tell me a time with rejected, it's probably best not to talk about application. It's probably best to talk about another side of life. Anyway, tell me about a time you failed and a lesson you learned from it. So, you know, like it digs deep. It can be quite painful answering some of these questions, especially when interviewers begin talking about why didn't you convert your sprint, or why didn't you kind of, you know, achieve something that you really wanted to achieve. You've got to be a bit hard-skinned. And the only way to answer them well is to prepare in advance, and that's the key. So that's resilience. Moving on, we also have decisiveness. So, you know, okay, tell me about a time you made a very fast decision. That's quite a hard question if you haven't prepared that before, if you haven't deeply thought about the right example. And look, some people might say, oh no, you should be able to talk about this, you know, off the back of your head, impromptu. But to be honest with you, the best response is going to come after maybe some thought, going away, doing kind of boring activities, then thinking again, and then coming up with a better idea. That's probably going to reach the best response. So I really recommend kind of being patient with it in that way and preparing in advance. But anyway, moving on, we've also got, you know, being innovative, showing leadership, flexibility, problem solving, integrity. Integrity is a weird one. You're thinking, what do you mean integrity? How am I going to answer an integrity question? Well, I've got this. This might mean, they might actually ask, like, what does integrity actually mean to you? They might ask, tell me about a time you acted with integrity. And this is just, you know, what do you do when no one's watching? What do you do when, you know, kind of like the camera's off you? Do you still do the right thing? And then they want to kind of see that in you. Anyway, and they might give you a situation. So like, for example, a student group president posts exam answers for all students in the group. How do you respond? That kind of thing. You've got to show that you're kind of you uphold that integrity in every situation. So those are all the different ones, from teamwork down to integrity. I would just have 2 examples. Now, you probably find that some of the teamwork ones will work well in leadership. I'd still try and choose 2 different examples. If you're really tight for time, you know, just go for kind of like maybe 2 examples that might work for both teamwork and leadership. But what you will also find is that if they go beyond this list, which isn't completely comprehensive, you'll probably have enough examples to then really kind of answer those more difficult questions you couldn't have otherwise predicted. You'll begin to adapt and become more fluid and become more dynamic in your responses. And this is why I really advocate at least 2 examples. You know, they might even ask 2 different teamwork situations. They might ask, okay, what's the time when you worked in a team? What's the time when you resolved a conflict within a group of people? Kind of like similar to a teamwork kind of question. So having those 2 examples should help you think more broadly about your experiences in general. It is tough, but once you do it once, as I said, you're sorted. Like, you know, you don't have to worry about it again. You just literally recap that content. Now, once you have those 2 examples, I want you to like kind of what I would do, what I kind of did that works for me is I had a Word document. I then briefly put those 2 examples, maybe a few bullet points explaining what I did, and you know, forgetting about the situation, task, and result. The action was the big point to jolt my memory in terms of what I did. I rehearsed them a few times, and then the big breakthrough, I remember doing video interviews, automated video interviews, and look, everything was virtual. Someone suggested summarizing the kind of competency situations, maybe in one A4 sheet. Now that's a lot of information to summarize in an A4 sheet. I call them like crib sheets, you know, kind of cheat sheets, whatever you call them, summary sheets. But what that forces you to do is to condense the most important information, and it is so valuable to have that one sheet. Make it colourful, make it neat, make it organised, and it's going to kind of really encourage you to kind of be precise with this, be very structured and organised in your approach. And then before any interview, all you do is you recap that sheet. You go through that sheet quickly, you test yourself, right, teamwork example, decisiveness, flexibility, leadership, innovative, and you go through, here are my 2 examples, here are my 2 examples. And then sometimes you'll add and you'll subtract, and you'll find, okay, that's another good example, let's include that. And then even throughout the year, you might think, right, I'm in a really bad team, this is going to be a good competency example. And like, you know, you can see the bright side of even a terrible situation, which is always a bit of positivity to kind of bring to your life. Then what you do before an interview, by recapping this sheet, is you're bringing that information which is lodged into your long-term memory into your short-term memory. Look, maybe that information you did cover, maybe you did revise it correctly, but the problem is, in that interview, your mind will go blank, and when it goes blank, it is horrid. It is intimidating, and the nerves get to you, and you get flustered, and you lose your concision, and you lose your confidence, and then the whole interview kind of collapses. By having this in your short-term memory, you're going to be geared, you're going to be warmed up, and it's going to massively help you for any kind of competency question you get. So hopefully that helps. Really do take the time to invest in this kind of area of interview preparation. It's going to carry you through. It's probably kind of help you with the whole kind of why you part of the cover letter, but even more importantly, it's going to help you when you get to that next round interview, when you get to that assessment center, and generally when you're just asking, you're answering these questions that are trying to convince that interviewer that you should be in that shortlist, you should be the one that goes through and receives that offer. So that kind of is a key component. I really hope you take time to invest in that.